Well, he is a gold medalist from IIT Roorkee. He has won several accolades, 100 national and international awards, including the Foyt Platinum, the Eurasian Prize, the Architecture Master Prize, and his works have been showcased at Salon Satellite in Milan.
Và quý vị thân mến, ngay bây giờ đây, chúng ta sẽ cùng chào đón người đã gặt hái hơn 100 giải thưởng quốc gia và quốc tế, cũng là tác giả của cuốn sách Design for Wow. Quý vị thân mến, hãy cùng chào đón kiến trúc sư Badrinath Kaleru.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, he has worked under several global legends such as Glenn Murcutt and Dominique Perrault. Well, he is also the author of Design for Wow, a book that captures his design philosophy. Please welcome Mr. Badrinath Kaleru on the stage with a big round of applause.
Welcome, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I think it's been an honor to stand in front of you and speak, and I really thank Sumit sir, and I also thank Saurav sir and Parul ma'am for having me here. And so, to get started, when we there is a lag. I think sir was right. So when we talk about evolving urban expressions, we are in a world when we talk about buildings that actually express themselves, and we talk that's part of an urban expression. So what we have done is some of the things that we have done. This is predominantly like how, when we say like facades as an experience of an urban setting, some of our work which has been globally awarded and being published. So when we talk about our story, we are a small practice, still evolving. We started way back in 2010, and it's been around 15 years where we have been constantly engaging in possibilities where we look at different challenges. We come from a small town. It's not a small town, it's a small city in India. It's Chandigarh. So when we look at this kind of presentation, what I try to intend to show you is about the challenges we have faced to get through what we are. Because you're all are great architects, I'm no one to teach you all. But it's something that to tell our journey, our story, to bring you up that what the lessons we have learned the hard way, probably that can inspire you. So when we started a practice, it's always about what we corely believe in is called as space is more, where we say that each space has a potential to be much more than what it is. It could tell you like history, it could be an experience, it could be something very unconventional. And when we always say that a space can always be something more. And so what we've understood from there is what we call our expression as like street smart architecture. So when you say street smart architecture, is like, let's say we have a project, we have a project and we can't get a facade from, let's say, built in a factory. Probably because we had cost challenges, because as emerging Eastern countries, we face these challenges every day where we have certain kind of cost challenges for budgets and everything. But are we looking beyond where we could find some solutions which are other than the conventional thing? That's what we understand as a street smart architecture. And also what we say that when we look at a city, it's all about buildings that express themselves. And there have been cases where when we look at a cityscape where there is so much of thing happening, which I would say that which is being built like standard fast architecture, where it doesn't actually show us an expression. So to deal with those situations, what we understood is that when we actually infuse something really interesting at some point in space, slowly it would be inducted and it would be contagious to express it to other sides. What I call as an urban acupuncture for architects. And so this is in this world where when we say that in emerging markets where architecture is ruled by economy and where plan is defined by zoning. So what we say is that the form is the new, form becomes the facade. So the facade is the new form when we talk about buildings which have been tied towards the zoning and we want to have more and more express in terms of the expression that we are looking at. So this is an interesting story because when we all have grown up and we studied as an architecture, it's always like it's been something that's a story that lives with me. When he says that when Louis Icahn actually asked like a brick what it wants to be, it said, I want to be an arch. And what if a concrete want to be? It said that I want to be granite. So that's the possibility of every particular thing that exists around us has a tremendous possibility of what it could be. So when we talk about what Ad had ever asked a facade about what it could be, so it would probably answer in this way: I want to be a feeling, an emotion, an aspiration for a generation possible beyond imagination. So, and what one man can do for multiple generations is what we all know that what happened 2,200 years before when Buddhism came to Vietnam, where one person's inspiration was triggered to form like imagination and possibilities for generations. And through me, the cities are felt, visually tasted. I draw people into building. And how many times it so happens that we see millions of buildings and only like very few of them we actually enter them. I know I'm photogenic, I'm Instagrammable. I want to be a unique piece and form an urban expression. So this is what when we talk about the journey of what we call as an urban expression. So we bring this journey way back around 15 years ago when we started our practice, one of the initial projects, where when we look at the left side of it was probably a very standard situation we have in our countries where we say that disused buildings that have been built in industrial areas where they have been built as per the need and they wouldn't have a strong order to or an architecture to it. So this was an example where we were asked by a client to actually relook at a possibility and to create something that was very welcoming. And what happened in the process was we had to deal with the scale that we had, and the budget was minuscule, wherein we didn't have the liberty to look at materials that were readily available. So we had to look at possibilities where we could create one within the factory, and these were all fiber panels and simple metal structure, which was it was stopping the heat from the south side instead of having a standard elevation. So it was more like a very subtle interpretation of how something that can be flowing, and together it forms something which is very interesting and flowing. So this is probably one of our earliest expressions when we say that something which was, and it triggered what we call as in the vicinity, different expressions of buildings which have been redone into it to make them interesting. So that's like a kind of a disused urban locality or industrial architecture has been converted something which is probably fun-loving, where there's a sense of attachment from the people, because we're all people with emotions, right? So when you talk about the connect of the people going to a factory could actually look at the building and say that probably this is the part that I did it myself. This is the part I've casted. What is the connection that you could bring, and what could the facade be connected to the people? And this was another experience where we are looking at, we come from Chandigarh, probably everybody would have heard Chandigarh because of Corbusier. So the challenge when we were doing this particular building was, we were, again, as I said, we were dealing with zoning, we had to build few things. And this is a kind of newer area where we wanted to do something that could carry the expression of Chandigarh into a newer area where it started looking like any other city, where buildings were looking like as if they were moved from different cities and they were like a collage of buildings. So here the idea was, how can we preserve the essence of what Corbusier has done to the city, but we are dealing with new kind of bylaws, new kind of economies, and new kind of parameters, which probably Corbusier didn't have to deal with. So the idea was to look at slim concrete panels where these were all cast in situ. We actually literally had to shutter up the entire thing, cast it up layer by layer, 4 feet by 4 feet, and to bring a kind of a secondary screen that forms like fencing. This forms like narrow passage, which forms like a balcony, it forms like a green area. So this is for one of the buildings where many a times in our countries, we have buildings which are built to suit, wherein like you build the buildings with anticipatory tenants because that's the kind of requirement we look at it. So this was one of the buildings where it was opened up for offices and mixed-use retail, and this was one of the ways we were looking at it, and probably the overall solution is how it has come up was pretty significant in terms of the locality and how it actually changed to create different other expressions. So this one is, there is a lag in, for sure. So this is one example where we talked about for an educational building. So it was a school where we did different, like the school was, because normally most schools, they get built across different ages and they're like as per the need, how they are built into it. And this was one of an example where we actually wanted to have a kind of an office and then a recreational area, which is like a multi-purpose hall on the first. And they got this very narrow piece of land that was attached to the main access road to the highway, because rest all they had something that was coming from the backside. So they wanted to make a very significant impact with this narrow facade that they have. And how we were looking at it was where we could have a very strong effect on the main elevation. At the same time, this also forms like, because this also forms like a kind of a semi area where we could be acting like a pre-function area for the school. And we had a fire exit that has to be integrated into the facade. So this idea was like more like free-flowing forms. And the interesting part was this was all built in brick and mortar. It was not even RCC. And when the initial idea which they liked was built into RCC, but later when they said like, though we like it, we don't have the necessary budget to build it. So here we had to remodify geometries, because these were double bent structures, but we bent them into simpler geometries and then erected them with like frame structure with columns and brick infills, which could save a lot of cost, and it was then done up with cement plaster. This was one of the example where we were again dealing with a kind of a challenge where we had a much complicated building that we created. It was free flowing and everything, bent into it, and this was one of an office, for corporate office, where they were into gaming industry, and that's when we wanted to start something which was something like a UFO kind of an element that was to bring into it. But the challenge was when we started building it, when they really liked it, a bigger challenge in which we had was we did actually had the budget to do architecture which should be bent into, it was an origami structure, and it was bent into multiple angles and facets. So here, when there were several discussions, we did several other designs, but they didn't like any of them. They liked the first one. And we were like, how could we trick the three-dimensional bent plate into something that could still feel the same, at the same time could reduce the cost? So that was the challenge we were facing to, where to have a feeling of a three-dimensional tessellated structure, but it is done in simpler plane geometry. So in this, if you look at it, how it has been detailed with metal tubular structure onto an RCC elevation, where it feels as if it is tessellated, wherein in reality it is actually like a simpler geometrical structure. So that was something that changed the whole idea of like wherein he had the phase 3, but in the idea of how to get this thing done. And all these things were also, when we talk about concrete, it was also about how do you cut off the unwanted heat from outside. So all these actually had a kind of peripheral balcony which would cut off the heats in different angles, and it would move in the ventilation that has to happen. And the experimented grew larger in terms of when we started doing with angular geometry. And one of the other example where we were doing it, this was primarily for an office and a hotel, wherein like they wanted to have some areas as an office and some areas would be like for the guest rooms that was be made. So it was, here the idea was how we could be work with more complicated geometry, but to address the challenge of the cost and other parameters, we opted to modular construction. So even if you look at these modules, though they look complicated, these are in different dimensions, but each one is a replicated module of another one. So by doing that, because all these were built with very standard shuttering plates, very standard elements that you find at all construction sites. But we had to then modulate, build each one of them, and then we created something because this particular building didn't had a very wide approach road. Because it didn't had a very wide approach road, we had to look through it sideways, and that's why we could create something what we could call as this kind of an angular elevation. That's what we call as a never never cube, where it free flows into it and creates something which is interesting. And this is an example of what, when we say that what could a veneer want to be, because probably this is an answer to what we did that. This is one of the experience center, I think, where even it's a channel partner of Numaica. And here the expression was possibly, when we talk about wood, has always been identified as something which is sturdy, strong, rectilinear. Here the idea was how could, with the kind of new advent or new technology, with the kind of new availability, can it have a free-flowing expression? Does the wood does not want to become a metal? This was the idea behind it, where we had this free-flowing ribbon to form an experience center, and it forms different elements of the furniture, it forms different element of ceiling elements, even consoles. So everything that lays into it, where it completely distorts the geometry and creates a very unique kind of experience. So this is all like parametrically cut, CNC cut, parametrically built. And when we did that experiment, we wanted to push ourselves if we could do something similar on the outside. Because when we were working with so this particular project was one of a developer and a builder whom we said that he wanted to, whom we built some of our projects, and he said that in this project we would want to do something even more which can push boundaries. This kind of a modern Art Deco style that was built into it. And the same idea of taking double vent structures from interiors to exteriors, where we had even more challenges in terms of how these has to be laid, and even to an extent that when we, the challenge with the curves is when you want to get the curve right, there are very few methods and possibilities where we could get it, and literally we had to go through it and sometimes do it ourselves or get those things laid into it, which probably gives you the same kind of feeling where drawings become inefficient, where when we want to have curves, where it becomes about more of the feel of it rather than the measure of it. You can measure the curve at 100 points and still get the curve wrong. So these were some of the challenges we went through, the props that we had to go through. We even wanted the rectilinear dimensions of completely flow into it. And yes, this was a sustainable project where we were, and even the staircase, the flowing. And these things were like how we could push our boundaries and still get something out of it. And this is an example where we are doing it in Dubai, where the client was interested looking at one of our project, and he said, like, what could be something that we can do and still push the boundaries and make something interesting? So here we were, because we are working in an evolved market, we are working in it, so where we actually thought of 3D printing the entire roof structure. Because right now, the Dubai administration allows only 2 levels of 3D printing. So we used it for the clubhouse on the top, and we also have plans, because it's an under construction, we also have plans to print out the entire facade into different parts of it. So this, it becomes a very interesting possibility of using new technologies at the same time when we could create it. So this was, that really came out where we could build different parts of it. We had, we were working with COBOL for the 3D printing part of it. They had different solutions, so we were doing the clubhouse part of it and something. So where each expression is like an evolving expression. And this is one of our, so this is a project, and what it feels like when an architect begins to be the client himself. So this is one of our office, and this is like a platinum certified LEED building. So here, the whole idea was when we were looking at how could we do justice, because when I went to the site, the only thing that has intruded my mind was this tree, which is right in the center, and this was something that we protected it all throughout, and elevation is something that when it gets to architects, it took a lot of time to do it. So the whole idea was, what if when we were so particular about maintaining this tree for so long, so how do we actually blend it? So we actually thought of what if the tree could have been a shadow for everything and blend something, like even the petals look like different parts of leaves, and how we could have this expression as if the tree has grown over the building. And this is some of the visuals. And how this experiment is going into something like a monument. This is it's a Jain Samadhi Sthal in Delhi, where we are talking about twisted geometries, which are double bend structures, and with different materials that could bend into and that could stand for a very long period of time. And this is how it is coming out, and it is really coming out really nicely. And what if we could increase the scale of it? This is around 300 feet in Punjab, where the twisted geometries are actually getting bigger. So it is far more challenging when we had to deal with it, because the conventional tools, what we use is CAD, Revit, and all they good. And we have started working on mechanical softwares like SolidWorks to get something, because it's purely driven into mechanical domain, where we see this huge structure. It's twice tall as me, which is the base of the structure. And even possibilities like this, wherein if you look at it, it is probably quite complicated for a residence project, where it weaves completely, because it's kind of one of the super mansions that like a lot of super rich Indians build. So this is one of them, wherein it's a 40,000 square foot single floor plate structure, where it completely interwoven into it. And he was fascinated with the ribbon structure, and he said, what if we could push the boundaries and create something that would be really something that could really a full-blown version of it. So this is what we have been working on. I think we are near close to the time, and thank you for your patience hearing, and it was been a pleasure presenting to you.